Good morning, everyone. This was so good. Does anyone know who that is? Close. It was Dory from Finding Nemo. And Dory had a memory problem. Nemo could say something, and Dory would forget. How clever. So easily we forget, don't we? So easily we forget. Well, this past week marked another year since the attack we had on September 11th in 2001. You had either had to live under a rock or not be born to not realize what was happening on that day. Most of us remember where we were when we even heard the news originally. 2 airplanes had been hijacked that flew into each of the towers and knocked down each of the twin towers. Not to mention one of the airplanes that was hijacked, a different one, actually crashed into the Pentagon, where Tammy's uncle happened to be working on that day when it happened. So we actually have a little close family tie to that happening. And then another one that was hijacked was crashed before it was able to strike any buildings out in a field. I believe that was the only airplanes. There was 2,753 people that died from the attacks at the Twin Towers. Not to mention the people they left behind, their husbands, their wives, their parents, their children, their grandchildren, their friends, all the people that it affected. Shortly after it happened, they stopped all air flights in the United States, every single air flight. And at the time, I was working for FedEx Express. We had got our flight in the morning, but we never sent one out that night. I can't remember, so easily we forget. I can't remember how many days air travel was down, but I think it was down for like 2 or 3 days. Someone can correct me if they know for sure. 4 days. 4 days. Isn't that something? And then the world changed as we know it. No more could you go into an airport and kiss your relatives, family goodbye if they left. You had to meet at the gate before you could even get in. You had to go through security, very stringent security. Many things that used to be allowed on flights weren't allowed anymore. After it happened, the people that were here to witness at that time, like myself and many of you, saw how the U.S. had come together. There wasn't so much division like there is today. People started filling up churches again. That was a big thing. So easily we forget, though, because within like a year, all of the people that started to fill up the churches again slowly start leaving the churches again. And within a couple of years, it was literally right back to where it was, where it started. So easily we forget. A person I work with has an 8th grade daughter, and she was saying that her daughter asked her the other day on the 11th, after she got home from school, they talked about what happened on September 11th in 2001. And her daughter asked her, "Mom, what's changed now since that happened?" And her mom said, "Well, now we don't even know if you're a girl or a boy anymore." It's hard to imagine how much has changed just over that 22-year period compared to what the world was like then and what the world is like now. So easily we forget. In Exodus 7 in the Bible is a story about Moses. And most all of you pretty much know, he was the baby that was saved by royalty and raised by royalty becoming a prince, yet the slaves were his family. He ended up killing an Egyptian, ended up leaving, found himself a wife, herded sheep, and yet God came to him in a burning bush and told him, Moses, you need to go free your people. You need to go free my people from Egypt. It's your family members that are over there. And of course, as the story goes, Moses didn't want to. I can't speak good enough. I don't even speak the language very good anymore. You don't want me to do this. Finally, he gave in. He was going to use Aaron, his brother, as a helper. God was going to. So anyways, Moses went to the Pharaoh, and God told him to tell him to free my people. Let my people go. And he did. He told Pharaoh that. And Pharaoh said, no way, I'm not going to do that. I need them slaves to do all the building and taking care of everything that they do. So, the 10 plagues that God laid on him started. The first plague, waters in Egypt became blood. After that, Moses went to Pharaoh again. Let my people go. He said, no. So, the next plague, there was frogs everywhere. And you think, well, what are frogs going to do? We, about 25 years ago, before we moved out here, we lived in Huron. And the road between Huron and Woolsey is like a 12-mile-long road with a lot of sloughs on it. One year, the frogs were so thick that road was just like ice, slick with frogs driving on it. Kind of a icky story, really, but I can imagine what it was like when there was that many frogs. Anyways, so Moses goes back again, and Pharaoh denies again. So the third plague was lice on man and beast. And then, of course, he didn't give in yet. So the fourth plague was flies. And then the fifth plague, after he didn't give in again, was livestock was diseased. But it was only the Egyptian livestock that ended up diseased and died. Then boils was number 6 on all men and beasts of Egypt. Of course, just on the men and the beasts of Egypt. And Pharaoh's heart was still hard, and he still wasn't going to let them free. 7th was hail and fire intermingled. And we all know what kind of damage hail itself can do just from our hailstorm that we had a month and a half ago. Imagine hail with fire. Pharaoh still would not release his slaves, God's people. So the 8th was locusts, and after they filled the land, there was no green left on any tree or any plant. 9th was darkness for 3 solid days. So then Moses went back to Pharaoh again and said, let my people go. And the 10th plague was the firstborn to all be killed. Pharaoh picked that one himself. Little did he know that it was going to back up on him completely. And what saved the slaves was they took the blood of a lamb without blemish, a first male, and they brushed that blood on their doorposts of their houses. So when the angel of death came to kill all the firstborn sons, that angel passed over their houses because of the blood of that lamb. Of course, that's where Passover came from the Passover in Egypt when God freed his slaves. Well, anyways, Moses went to Pharaoh again. And in Pharaoh's grief, he said, take your people and everything they have and leave. So they did. Moses led them out of Egypt And God started leading them with a pillar of fire by night and a pillar cloud by day. But shortly after they left, Pharaoh so easily forgot how powerful the God of Israel was and what that God had done with all the plagues. He forgot about all the people that had died. And he wanted to go and destroy all those people. So he gathered up his army and he took off chasing after them. When they got to the Red Sea, everyone knows that God parted the waters and allowed his people through the Red Sea. And as soon as the Egyptians got into the sea, before they got across it, he let the water collapse and kill all the Egyptians. Then, as he was leading his people through the desert to the land of milk and honey, to their promised land, he took bitter water and he ended up making it sweet so that they could drink it when they were thirsty. And when they were hungry, God gave them manna to eat, manna from heaven. Can you imagine seeing those miracles happen today? Not to mention the pillar fire at night leading you. And deserts, if any of you have been on deserts, which I haven't, I know Forrest has, at night, even the hottest desert can be cold. I have a feeling that that pillar fire wasn't just so they could see it to follow them. I have a feeling that that pillar fire was to create some heat to protect them too. I might be wrong. I don't know. And then during the daytime, that pillar cloud that led them around, the deserts get extremely hot during the daytime. I have a feeling that that pillar cloud, not only was it leading them, it was protecting them from the heat and from the sunlight. Well, in the 3rd month after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. That was from Exodus 19, verse 1. So they camped there. And Moses went up onto Mount Sinai. He was going to get the 10 Commandments from God on stone. Well, while they were waiting for Moses to come down, and he just never comes, then a day goes by, he didn't come down. Another day goes by, he didn't come down. Pretty soon, the people all say, I don't think he's going to come down. We need to make a God that we can worship, a God that saved us from the land of Egypt. So they even convinced Aaron, and everyone took all the gold they had, and they made a golden calf as a god. How easily they forgot about the God of Israel that led them out of Egypt, saved them from the Egyptian army in the Red Sea, gave them water, gave them food. How easily they forgot. Well, when Moses came down, Aaron tells Moses, we just put all the gold in the fire and out came this calf. I can't believe that. But somehow they forgot everything that God had done for them. Don't we forget now things that God has done for us too? When we need something and we're praying for something to happen, and it does, how easily we forget that time that he provided for us a couple weeks ago, a couple years ago, a couple decades ago. Or when we have a family member or someone that was ill or sick or in the hospital in Sioux Falls with a collapsed lung, and we pray for God to heal and restore, and God heals and restores. And then down the road a little longer, we kind of forget the power of our God and what he'd done. I want to read Exodus 32. Verse 1. It said, "Now when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said, 'Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For this Moses, the man who brought us up out in the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him.'" Now you can turn the pages over a little ways to 32, verse 9 to 14. We'll be reading shortly. "Just like the Israelites, who were God's chosen people, did, the plagues he used to get them out of Egypt, the food and water he provided for them as he led them to the promised land, the parting of the Red Sea, saving them from the Egyptians, leading them with dark pillar cloud during the day and fire at night, and then here at Mount Sinai, Moses was gone for a little while, and so easily they forgot." Exodus 32, verse 9 to 14. "And the Lord said to Moses, 'I have seen this people, and indeed it's a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, that I may consume them, and I will make of you a great nation.' Then Moses pleaded with the Lord his God, saying, 'Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with a great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians speak and say, he brought them out to harm them, to kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce wrath and relent from the harm to your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self, and said to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of I will give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever.' So the Lord relented from the harm which he said he would do to his people." I want to read a commentary from Patriarchs and Prophets on the verse about Moses and his prayer to God, the unselfish prayer that he had. As Moses interceded for Israel, his timidity was lost in his deep interest and love for those for whom he had, in the hands of God, been the means of doing so much. The Lord listened to his pleadings and granted his unselfish prayer. God had proved his servant. He had tested his faithfulness and his love for that erring, ungrateful people. And nobly had Moses endured the trial. His interest in Israel sprang from no selfish motive. He just loved them people, pleaded with them. He was their intercessor. He prayed for them to God, interceded to God. Well, we're not a whole lot different than they are we? No, we're not. And we have an intercessor that's pleading for us too. Who's that intercessor? As Gay read in Hebrews 7:25. I want to read it again. Hebrews 7, verse 25. Therefore, he is also able to save to the uttermost those who come to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. He always lives to make intercession for us. Just as God was leading the Israelites through the desert to the promised land with milk and honey, he's leading and guiding us along too, isn't he? After Moses pled for them with God, the Israelites were given an option. Whoever's on the Lord's side, come to me. The other option was death. It's the same option that we all have today. Whoever's on the Lord's side, come to me. Whoever isn't will be death. What option will you choose? Let's not forget how powerful our God is and everything that he's done, not only what he's done in the history of the Bible, but what he's done for us individually in our lives. Let's not forget the sacrifice of our intercessor, Jesus, the one pleading for us, the one that took all of our sin and put it on his shoulder and died for us to be the Passover lamb for us, so that we could have his blood on our doorpost when the angel of death passes. This world is not our home. Jesus went to prepare a place for us that is our true home with him, our true home with no pain, no sorrow, no tears, no suffering, with no death. That is our home. Will you choose Jesus in life?